This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, we come to you on the heels of a couple of very significant days south of here in the United States. If you've paid even a small amount of attention to the news cycle, you know that ICE agents involved in another shooting, a fatal shooting in Minneapolis, an ICU nurse by the name of Alex Preddy shot multiple times, shot dead. And of course, it has inspired at least two former presidents, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. You'll hear from their statements in just a moment, essentially saying that this needs to be a wake-up call for Americans, that America's entire ethos is under attack. This, as President Donald Trump has threatened 100% tariffs on Canada again. There seems to be a misunderstanding or a miscommunication about what Canada's deal with China looks like. We'll get into that with Supriya Dwivedi in just a moment. Of course, you know she joins us first episode of every week, courtesy of Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. And Donald Trump's back amid all of this to calling Canada's Prime Minister Governor Mark Carney. So goes the ebb and flow of American involvement, and I use the word involvement intentionally, with talk around Alberta separatism. You've got the U.S. Treasury Secretary going on cable news, essentially welcoming Alberta to the United States, should it get that far. We'll review all of this. We'll dip into our live chat, see what Real Talkers have to say. And, of course, we'll wrap today with an email from a new Real Talker in BC that's written in with some thoughts to talk at ryanjesperson.com. That presented by our friends at Solar by Kuby. Let's get to Supriya. Before we do, let you know this episode is happening with the presenting sponsorship of our friends at RapidX Financial. You know, the crypto world moves fast, but your trust in an exchange cannot and should not be a gamble, and that's why Real Talk is proud to partner with RapidX Financial, a made-in-Alberta solution backed by the same experts behind those rapid cash ATMs that you've seen across the country for more than a quarter century. RapidX makes it easy to get started with 3 ways to trade. You can use one of their physical crypto ATMs. They've got an over-the-counter desk for discrete, larger value trades, or if you need a little human input, if you have any questions, and of course the secure online platform at rapidxfinancial.com. And because you're hearing about this on Real Talk, there's a special offer for you if you go to rapidxfinancial.com and use the code RYAN50, Ryan50, all one word. They're going to knock 50% off fees on all of your online Interac e-transfer trades. It's a fantastic incentive. RapidX is secure, it's FinTrack registered, and critically, it's non-custodial, which means you're always going to control your keys. That's rapidxfinancial.com. Use the promo code RYAN50 for Real Talk and Real Bitcoin. As we welcome former senior advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada, national media pundit, and a regular contributor to this show, Supriya Dwivedi, joining us in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Welcome back. Good to see you. Hell of a weekend in the news cycle.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't even really know where to begin. So I'm looking to you to guide us through this conversation because there's so much to dig into, and all I want to do is hide under a pile of coats.
Yeah, no kidding. And it's like you look at what's happening in Minneapolis. I guess why don't we start there? It's,
Sure.
we'll transition it. It's all almost intertwined, I think, as Canadians, some of us looking aghast at what's happening in Minneapolis as Governor Walz there has deployed the National Guard. You just see a bunch of Humvees driving through the streets of Minneapolis. And for me, it's oftentimes the comments on visuals like that where Americans ostensibly, or at least people that are commenting on the images of these armored vehicles rolling through Minneapolis going, are they here to protect ICE? Are they here to protect American citizens from ICE? People are basically trying to figure out what's going on. At the center of all this, an ICU nurse who worked at the local VA helping American servicemen and women carrying a 9mm legally, a concealed carry permit. I know for a lot of Canadians, maybe that's something that's tough for people to wrap their minds around. You automatically think somebody's got to look. At least I know how my mind works. Supriya, I don't know about you.
Yeah, like if you're strapped, then it must be against the law somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
And you hear the statements, including from, American, like at the top of the chain, American officials saying what we do know at this point. gaslighting out of the gates. What we do know at this point is that a man, arrived, with a loaded, I heard it described as a loaded high capacity 9mm. The fact of the matter is that he was legally carrying, but filming. Everyone's seen the video. I know that there are different versions of what everybody can see in plain sight, but the fact of the matter is a woman pushed to the ground. This ICU nurse jumps in, filming the entire thing with his camera, with his phone. And the next thing you know, he's been disarmed. He's on the ground, and then he's being, pumped full of lead,
in the back.
basically. Shot multiple times.
Pumped with bullets in the back. Yeah. And I think, again, like what is the most sort of jarring thing for folks that are, witnessing this, let alone like the folks that are actually in the ground, on the ground right now in Minnesota and Minneapolis, is like looking at this, seeing what we can all see with video, like you said, captured via multiple angles. Like there are all sorts of folks that were recording the entire exchange, and yet you have the administration come out and tell us once again not to believe our eyes and ears. And it's getting really like dystopian. It's always sort of been dystopian, but this is getting to the part of the dystopia where you're like, should we be getting here this quickly? Because isn't there normally a longer lag period? And it really doesn't seem that way. The other thing that really stood out to me in all of this is in reading about the aftermath, his parents, so Alex's parents, were not informed that he was killed by any official, any government official, anything. They were only really made aware of his death when journalists had contacted them, letting them know. And the one of the very first journalists to get through, they responded by saying like, "Oh, well, we've seen the video. It does look like him." So I can't even imagine what his poor family and friends have had to go through this last little bit. And unfortunately, I don't see a path here that leads to ICE leaving, peacefully and properly. And I know you and I are talking about it, and I'm not suggesting that there isn't, a ton of U.S. media coverage about this, because there obviously is. But from like the corporate business world, it does seem to be as though it's business as usual. And that, to me, I think is another layer of the dystopia I wasn't prepared for. Like all of this has unfolded, and yet you have like some of the largest CEOs and business leaders that are gathering at the White House because there's some propaganda movie that's been put out there by the First Lady. And so they're all, hobnobbing, having a gay old time.
Meta Modern's already in our live chat right now with the kicking into the super chat. We appreciate that. Says, remember, folks, those who will excuse the murders of Renee Good and Alex Preddy at the hands of the state will also accuse yours. And then we've got the different perspective in here, which is, folks like Kyle suggesting that all of the hysteria around this is TDS, is Trump derangement
hysteria.
Syndrome. Yeah.
The state executing people is hysteria? No, that's not hysteria. This is, if you wanted actual, hysteria, then it would have been like months and months ago when sort of nothing was happening. Look, I'm not discounting the fact that leftists can sound absolutely annoying when talking about Trump or any other Republican president, right? Even a normie Republican president, like progressives can sound particularly annoying at even the best of times. But that isn't this, okay? Here you have folks that are literally being gunned down by the state, and not when it's a threat to themselves. And again, this isn't exactly a new phenomenon for folks being killed at the hands of the state in the U.S. We have a bunch of video of this happening for years and years and years when it comes to police and black people. And now you're seeing that expanded. And I think what is the takeaway for people of the level of, how jarring it is for folks is the fact that there doesn't seem to be any sort of remorse. Like, with Renee Good, the last words that the ICE officer said was like, fucking bitch. Mm-hmm. And in this situation, the guy's completely disarmed. He's on his back. He was there to help another woman who was pepper sprayed, and they're shooting him in the back. He's of no threat, and yet riddled full of bullets. Like, that's not hysteria. This is, and I seriously question somebody's sanity if they're looking at this and then looking at the reaction and then claiming people are being hysterical because of this.
Look at this post here from the Minnesota National Guard. I'll read it for folks listening on the podcast. Members, there's a photo of them with the Humvees behind them. Members of the Minnesota National Guard are on standby, ready to assist local law enforcement and public safety agencies. If our members are activated, they'll be wearing reflective vests, as pictured here, to help distinguish them from other agencies in similar uniforms. What do you read into that?
We should just start thinking about what happens if the U.S. descends into, I'm not saying full-fledged civil war, but if there's if something happens at different levels of law enforcement and there's a disagreement and there's and it, escalates, I don't know. What do we do? What does Canada do as a response?
Yeah, well, I mean, the post goes on to say these Minnesota National Guardsmen live, work, and serve in our state and are focused on protecting life, preserving property, and ensuring Minnesotans can safely exercise their First Amendment rights. I mean, there's a lot that they're saying without saying, but I think people across the country have their hearts in their throats more than usual, which is saying a lot.
Yeah, I mean, didn't the Timberwolves have to postpone a game? It's the fact that I don't know, this to me, I find it surprising that people, particularly Canadians, would still sort of refer to this as an overreaction or as Trump derangement syndrome or whatever, when you have ICE murdering people in the streets and knowing that they're being filmed, knowing that it's going to be captured at multiple angles, knowing that their audio is going to be carried through, the filming, and they seem still okay with it.
Yeah, let me read statements here from a couple of former U.S. presidents. I know those critical of our coverage will immediately point out that these two presidents were Democrats. I'll read the first from Barack Obama. He was the first to post. He posted barackobama.medium.com. He also released it on his Instagram and other social platforms. The killing of Alex Preddy, a heartbreaking tragedy. It should also be a wake-up call to every American, regardless of party, that many of our core values as a nation are increasingly under assault. He goes on to say federal law enforcement, immigration agents have a tough job, but Americans expect them to carry out their duties in a lawful, accountable way and work with, not against, state and local officials to ensure public safety. He says that's not what we're seeing in Minnesota. In fact, we're seeing the opposite. He says for weeks now, people across the country have been rightly outraged by the spectacle of masked ICE recruits and other federal agents acting with impunity and engaging in tactics that seem designed to intimidate, harass, provoke, and endanger the residents of a major American city. He says these unprecedented tactics, which even the former top lawyer of DHS, of the Department of Homeland Security in the first Trump administration, is characterized as embarrassing, lawless, and cruel, have now resulted in the fatal shootings of two U.S. citizens. He goes on, I won't read the entire thing, says this is a timely reminder that ultimately it's up to each of us as citizens to speak out against injustice, protect our basic freedoms, and hold our government accountable. President Clinton, releasing a statement not long after, says in recent weeks we've watched the horrible scenes play out in Minneapolis, other communities that I never thought would take place in America. People, including children, have been seized from their homes, workplaces, and the street by masked federal agents. Peaceful protesters, citizens exercising their constitutional right to observe and document law enforcement, have been arrested, beaten, tear gassed, and most searingly, in the cases of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, shot and killed. He goes on to say, over the course of a lifetime, we face only a few moments where the decisions we make, the actions we take, will shape our history for years to come. This is one of them. President Clinton says, if we give our freedoms away after 250 years, we might never get them back. It's up to all of us who believe in the promise of American democracy to stand up, speak out, and show that our nation still belongs to we, the people. What sort of an impact do you think statements from former presidents have?
Zero. I mean, honestly, right now, zero. I hate to say that. I don't mean to sound incredibly cynical about this, but look, I mean, the fact that Bill Clinton only put it out after Barack Obama did, I think Bill Clinton would have a different sort of sway with some folks than perhaps a former President Obama would. But I think at this point, you already sort of, I'm not saying that you discounted their statements, but you pointed out that they were both Democrats. I think we're in a hyper-partisan environment. I think it would be helpful if George W. Bush wanted to speak out about this, or if we had more high-ranking Republicans that were speaking out either out against this or in favor of the Second Amendment and the First Amendment. But we're not really seeing that. And I think, unfortunately, when you have like a bunch of folks like these ICE officers that don't feel that they're accountable to the American people or responsible for folks' safety, and that their only thing is to produce like content as though they're in a Call of Duty game, I think we're in a real dangerous place. And then you couple that with this sort of they have this sense of that they're untouchable. So, I mean, I've seen tons of video of ICE officers filming not protesters, but legal observers that are there to observe the protest, taking pictures of their license plates or filming their cars, and then saying that they're going to be put into a database with domestic terrorists. And that, I think, should be very chilling for anyone. And I think if you couple that with some of what we've been hearing out of the Trump administration, labeling both Renee Good and Alex Preddy as these apparent domestic terrorists. I think Stephen Miller described Alex as being a would-be assassin.
Right.
You get into the situation where it's like, okay, well, now they're making lists of Americans that aren't considered American enough. Like that's really chilling stuff.
Yeah. In our live chat, we have folks sort of wondering where all of this goes, right? Like there's, Lorraine in here. Thanks for your YouTube channel membership, Lorraine. Says, when is it enough? When will the other two branches of government remove him? So where does all this go? Like talking strategy, you and I have talked midterms before and whether or not they'll actually even happen. There's obviously going to be pressure on GOP, on Republican lawmakers to do something about this, but up until this point, the majority of them are walking the line amid, I think, probably scathing indictments from other elected officials and members of the public saying, listen, at some point, we're all going to look back at this point in history. I hate to invoke the Holocaust, okay? Like I almost want to refuse to accept for the point that a lot of people are saying, listen, on the 80th anniversary of the commencement of the Nuremberg trials, people should start thinking about, how they're behaving, how they're acting, how they're torquing legislation or superseding American law, who they're siding with, what they're choosing to do with their power. I mean, this is really where the language is at right now. Like, realistically, where do you see all this going?
I don't know, and I don't know if people want that answer because it's not going to be good. Like, I don't think this gets better necessarily, in the way that we've usually seen things get better, which is you have an administration back off once they realize that all the stuff that they're doing is incredibly unpopular. But this has been unpopular. None of this is popular. It's not as though folks are, even Republicans are highly approving of the Trump administration's actions right now in the state of Minnesota. So I don't know. In a normal timeline, he would have already sort of backed off. But we're not seeing that. And I think part of it is because you're not really seeing a lot of corporate folks or business leaders speak out against this. And until there's some sort of hit to, either Trump's personal finances or finances of the country more generally, as delineated by stock markets falling or whatever may be the case, I don't think it's going to hit home, unfortunately. Like this isn't normal. None of this is normal. So I don't think any previous playbook can really be used here.
Yeah, I'll guarantee you one thing. I guess I can't technically guarantee, but I am almost 100% certain that when Alex Preddy left his house that morning, he didn't expect to be shot multiple times, unarmed, by the way. He had been disarmed, which is another fair question to ask, right? Like there's a lot of I know they call them like 2A supporters or like these Second Amendment supporters, folks that, and that's fine. That's their right in the United States. Like are very, very convicted and feel very strongly about the right to carry, right to concealed carry. So who knows the mindset of why someone would be carrying But, for a lot of people, that's just kind of what they do. Like, that's part of their daily routine. This isn't like, I saw some people, I was hosting a pretty high profile event over the weekend, and somebody comes up to me in the middle of the dinner and says, hey, how would you compare the situation between Alex Preddy and Kyle Rittenhouse? And I was like, oh, geez, right? They go, well, both showed up armed to an event. They said the number one thing I would say is, like, Preddy was, concealed carry pistol on his back. Rittenhouse basically showed up with a rifle, but similar situations. And look at everybody who backed Rittenhouse automatically and without question based on the Second Amendment, based on his Second Amendment rights. And where are those people now? Where are the people that are big on small government? Where are the don't tread on me folks, right? There's obviously a double standard there, which I think is obvious and at the same time probably understandable when it comes to the partisan polarized nature of all of this. But what would you have said to the person in that situation? Kyle Rittenhouse versus Alex Preddy. Obviously very different situations, but the people that had Rittenhouse's back don't have Preddy's back here.
I mean, I don't know what to say other than it's like a blatant, glaring hypocrisy, right? Like, it's you either support these principles of a Second Amendment right, or you don't in an American context. And like, to me, it's binary. So all of the folks that were loudly defending Kyle Rittenhouse, even if they, maybe didn't disagree with the killing aspect of it, but defended his right to show up to a protest with, with the gun that he did and as many clips as he had on him. I don't remember the full facts of the case, but everybody remembers that picture of him holding that rifle, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like, there isn't a ton to say, and I don't think you can parse this out sort of logically, because I don't think people are being very logical right now. I think if there's any consistency in principles, you would have Republicans out of all people and conservatives out of all people in the states that would be at the front of this sort of, having their voices be heard about how this isn't the America that they know and love. But I don't know if we're actually seeing that.
For information's sake, it should be noted that Kyle Rittenhouse himself has been posting about the shootings and the protests in Minneapolis. And soon after border agents fatally shot Preddy, Rittenhouse posted a story on Instagram about liberating Minneapolis and then shared a how to stay alive hack, which includes don't pull guns on federal agents. Earlier in the week, he posted an image that looked like it was generated by AI of him carrying firearms in what appeared to be Minneapolis, and now, I mean, obviously, people are attacking him on that. So he's doing what he can to stoke the fire.
What a weirdo! He also posted. I don't know if you saw this. This was like a few weeks ago, Ryan. But he posted something about how if there's fluoride in your water, it makes you gay. And I was like, what a weird way to admit you're having gay thoughts, to blame it on the water, Kyle. But cool, like, whatever.
I want to invite real talkers. Let us know what they're thinking about this. I mean, there's a ton here in the live chat as well. Sharon, for example, says it's very stressful. It gives me anxiety. Who would have thought that this would happen in our lifetime? Sharon says maybe you guys should have someone on the show to talk about the stresses of today, which, is probably a pretty good idea. Tracy says governments around the world need to come together against all hate speech, return to a time where we prosecute treason. Steph says, I saw an ICE agent clapping after Mr. Preddy was shot. She says it's absolutely sickening. I mean, obviously, Pongy says, I don't know if I heard, I definitely didn't hear this, as one of the ICE agents reportedly said to another in one of the videos, it's just like Call of Duty. If that's true, that's wild. I know a lot of people have been critical of those agents. You look like you want to say something.
I've read that. So whatever story that was, I think it was an AP story. I read that same story about the reference to Call of Duty. So it tracks.
I mean, the whole thing is like, you wonder where this all goes. Like, there's Minnesotans right now. There'll be Americans across it. I mean, all eyes are on Minnesota right now that are going to say, well, I don't want to be the next one. A civilian, like an innocent civilian who's like, whose police record is all but like a couple of parking tickets or a couple of speeding tickets that ends up in the morgue because they showed up to protest. These are people that are, filming with their phones and blowing whistles. And at the same time, that's exactly what the administration, that's exactly what ICE wants, right? They want them all to stay home. They want them to be scared shitless.
That's what any authoritarian regime wants, right? Is to scare your people into staying home. And I think, like, let me ask you, how are what, these tactics, how are they different from like an authoritarian regime's tactics?
Yeah. Why don't we just
I don't have an answer. To me, it would be very little, right? I don't know. I guess they still have an open internet, so they've got that going for them, where at least whatever they're broadcasting can be broadcast. But I don't know. It's also now that the TikTok decision has gone through and there's now U.S. ownership of TikTok, I've seen and read a ton of complaints from users saying that organically now within their own feeds or on the For You page, they're not getting a ton of political content or any political content anymore. So it seems that as though that the algorithm, at least for U.S. TikTok, is now suppressing a lot of that content.
We got Cherie in our chat basically saying, how can any Canadian look down at what's happening in the United States right now and want to be a part of it? That's basically where we'll take.
That's a good segue for us to talk about Alberta.
Isn't it? I saw Cherie's note and I was like, well, gosh, you just kind of set the table for us. U.S. Treasury Secretary making, I think, what would qualify as inflammatory statements about an independent Alberta. We'll play that in just a second, ostensibly opening the door for the return of that 51st state stuff. The president is pouring gas on that, too. We'll get more from Supriya Dwivedi on that in just a second. In the meantime, Real Talkers, want to remind you, you can always leave a comment on our YouTube episodes on Spotify, or you can send us an email 24/7 to talk@ryanjesperson.com.
Ground control to Major Tom.
We took our first steps, brave steps, bold steps in 2001, accomplishing the extraordinary. Today, we lead in pediatric organ transplants and many other specializations. Now imagine the possibilities in a space of our own. Help us launch the new Stollery Children's Hospital with no bounds to what we'll accomplish next.
Friesen Brothers is proud to present the Future of Alberta Food, friends. This is an artisan cuisine challenge in conjunction with Nate, featuring 6 teams of Alberta food professionals. This event is designed to challenge their butchering, baking, cooking, and hospitality expertise, as well as creativity. So focusing on really great food between these 6 teams, they're all going to create 24 original dishes all together based on, they're coming at it from scratch, which is wonderful. But based on those specific challenges, you can join for the culmination of this challenge in a sit-down reception coming up February 21st, 6 p.m. at Ernest's Dining Room at Nate. A limited number of tickets are available. This sells out every single year. You want to try these delicious dishes and watch the future of Alberta food happening before your very eyes. You can check out friesen.com/challenge to get your tickets today. Hey, did you catch Kerry Williams from North Road Investment Council on Real Talk just a few days ago? He talked to us about your rich life equation. Great insights to get your finances focused into a new year. You can check out the highlight on our YouTube channel or watch that full episode. And if what Kerry said resonated with you and you'd like to hear more, you can connect with the team at North Road Investment Council. A steady hand and a studied voice to guide you through wealth and investing by visiting their website. That's northroadic.com. And a shout out to our friends at California Closets. Wonderful to run into them at Edmonton Chamber Ball over the weekend. An amazing room full of Edmonton's business movers and shakers. California Closets of Canada is proudly Canadian-owned, manufacturing everything they install right here in the province of Alberta. All of that is guaranteed for life, by the way, which would be no surprise. They stand behind what they design and install. That's custom closets, systems, solutions for the entire home, including custom garages. It all starts with a conversation with a California Closets designer and go from there. They can custom design to fit your space and your budget. You can request that free consultation, see some of the work that they've done in Alberta households, and, of course, learn more about that design process by checking out their website. That's californiaclosets.ca. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent speaking on ABC over the weekend as we're joined by Supriya Dwivedi, musing about Alberta separation, talking about opening the door. I want to get your take on this, Supriya, but first let's show folks that may not have heard the quote exactly what we're talking about. Here's the U.S. Treasury Secretary on ABC. Okay, we'll pop that clip in just a second, but you did hear the interview, obviously. Your thoughts on basically what he's saying?
I mean, what struck me is I think it was either last week or the week before, Ryan, you and I were talking about comments that Steve Bannon had made, right, in the context of Alberta Separatist movement. And Bannon, of course, is no longer a member of the administration. I'm sure he still has the ear of many within the administration and is certainly considered an influencer within MAGA world or Trump world. So, even MAGA constituents or what have you would be listening to him. But Scott Bessent represents like an actual high-ranking Trump official. So this was, it went from the shadows of, right-wing podcasters, let's say, to a major visible figure in the Trump White House openly sort of saying that, yeah, sure, let's he wasn't like, yay, they should separate from Canada, but I mean the sentiment was sort of there, and said that it would be welcomed. So that's worrying, and that is foreign interference, by the way. So,
yeah. Okay. Here we got the clip. Let me tee it up here so we can sort of dig into the specifics of it. Here he is on ABC.
With all the oil and the natural resources coming out of Canada, Texas is still larger.
We're having a case of the
Alberta is a wealth of natural resources, but they won't let them build a pipeline to the Pacific. I think we should let them come down into the U.S., and Alberta is a natural partner for the U.S. They have great resources. The Albertans are very independent people. Rumors that they may have a referendum on whether they want to stay in Canada or not.
Sounds like you may know something up there.
People are saying, people are talking. People are talking. People want sovereignty. They want what the U.S. has got.
So they want what the U.S. has got. So that's Bessent on with Jack Posobiec, okay? So obviously a popular podcaster, Republican podcaster, who, by the way, Supriya, kind of sounded like maybe he wasn't 100% aware that there's been talk about Alberta separatism, sort of acting like this was a big scoop. He sort of like sounds like you kind of know what's kind of like you have the inside track on what's going on. It's like, dude, everybody is talking about this up here regardless. But then here he is on mainstream news. So here he is on ABC this week, and this in the context, his appearance was in the context of Trump threatening Canada with this 100% tariff over the China deal, and we'll get to that in a second. But here he is on ABC, and I think this is pretty significant.
So 8 or 9 days ago, he had this to say about Canada negotiating with China.
How do you see the deals Canada and China have just signed, trade deals between the two partners?
Well, that's okay. That's what he should be doing. I mean, it's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that.
Okay, so he gives a green light to a deal with China just after they do it, and then 9 days later he's saying that's it, 100% tariffs.
Well, no, there's possibility of 100% tariffs if they do a free trade deal. So
it's not now. This is if they go further than what's already happened.
Well, it's if they go further, if we see that the Canadians are allowing the Chinese to dump goods. And Jonathan, just to be clear, that the Canadians a few months ago joined the U.S. in putting high steel tariffs on China because the Chinese are dumping. The Europeans also have done the same thing. And it looks like that Prime Minister Carney may have done some kind of about face.
You've got...
Okay, so here we have two different, it's kind of like the premise of this whole thing is they're, number one, doesn't appear to be kind of consensus on what the Canada-China deal is, or at least how it's perceived by the Americans. And number two, the impact of that deal on the thinking of President Trump. And then, of course, all of this wrapping into the future. I don't even want to put it like the future of Alberta, because this is, quite frankly, none of their business, and it really has nothing to do with any of this. But the waters are muddied with these two statements over the weekend. Would you agree?
Yeah, but like let's unpack this a little bit. So first and foremost, I mean, we haven't entered into a free trade deal with China. Like that's absolutely bonkers, right? And the U.S. would know if we were pursuing a free trade deal with China, let alone to enter into one, because as part of CUSMA, we would have to give them a heads up if we were going to be going down that route, because China's a non-market economy, and there's, something in CUSMA that says if we're going to enter into an agreement with a non-market economy, then we've got to give the other partners to CUSMA a heads up about it. So, and somebody like Scott Bessent would know that. So I see this as cleanup for Grandpa's posting on social media over the weekend threatening Canada with 100% tariffs, because now we're seeing that walk back, and it's like, whoa. It's not really 100% tariffs. It's only if they enter into a free trade deal with them. That's not what we did. There wasn't an about face. You can claim that, credibly or arguably claim that Carney's remarks in Davos were seen as a repudiation of Trump, and in making taking off the tariffs for Chinese EVs is signaling that we need to diversify and that there's more than just the U.S. that we can be doing trade with. All of that's fine, cool, whatever. But it's in no way is that a free trade deal, and in no way is it anywhere near first of all, what the U.S. does with China, because that's the other thing, right, is that not only is Trump going to China in April, or he's scheduled to anyway, but they do way more trade with China than we do on a per capita basis. So it's not even like they're practicing what they're preaching here. And quite frankly, any Canadian who continues to blame Carney or Canada for Trump's outburst on this is kind of proving themselves to be the biggest willful idiot imaginable.
So here's the post from Donald Trump that you reference on January 24th. That would have been the Saturday. Says the last thing the world needs is to have China take over Canada. It's not going to happen or even come close to happening. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. What's most significant about that, aside, or maybe this is it, aside from the fact that he's alluding to the possibility, even musing about the he's essentially implying that it's wheels in motion, that it's happening. The last thing the world needs is to have China take over Canada. What would you say if you were in officially in a messaging capacity for the PMO? Does the Prime Minister need to respond to this?
Unfortunately, yes, I think he does need to respond. And the reason why I say it's unfortunate, because there's almost nothing that the Prime Minister can say, or the government, any of the higher profile government officials that are in regular contact with U.S. counterparts when it comes to renegotiation of CUSMA or just trade generally. It's going to end up being whacked against their head in retaliation. But they do need to respond, because I'm not saying to a specific post, but the general sentiment here, I think, needs to be responded to, first of all. And I do think the Prime Minister did do some of that over the weekend. He was in Ottawa for a caucus meeting, and the media did catch him to be able to deliver remarks. But the problem with saying one thing as you're going into a caucus room or as you're leaving a meeting is that you're not necessarily getting full message saturation with just saying it once. And I think right now there's going to be a lot of confusion that is going to be sowed, not just by the U.S. as a state actor, but as their digital army sort of goes to work here. And right now, I think we need to be, doing a lot of proactive comms so that Canadians know what's what, right? I would be curious right now to see how many Canadians are kind of muddied up, to use your term, they muddied the waters on our China, deal, if you want to call it that. So it's, I don't know. I think folks need to know what the, what the up and up is. And I think that requires proactive government comms on this.
You know how, in law and politics and even just general real life, you got to know when to hold them and you got to know when to fold them. You got to know.
Are you
when
going to sing the whole song? Is where we're going?
I actually decided to cut it off at the end of the one lyric. You got to know when to walk away, know when to run. But there wasn't the option there of you got to know when to dig in and when to clap back. It doesn't really work in the poker analogy. But a post to Truth Social over the weekend and kind of the return of that inflammatory statement. I know a lot of people will chuckle. I know a lot of people will roll their eyes. A lot of people will say it's nothing, if not a negotiating tactic. But the president, as reported here by BNN Bloomberg, here's a post. If Governor Carney, here it is again, Supriya, if Governor Carney thinks that he's going to make Canada a drop-off port for China to send goods and products into the U.S., Trump writes, he's sorely mistaken. China will eat Canada alive, completely devour it, including the destruction of their businesses, social fabric, and general way of life. if Canada makes a deal with China, it will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff, and then it goes on, a tariff against all Canadian goods and products coming into the USA. But I want to ask you about just invoking the word governor again, about referring to him as governor again. There are reports that the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, and reports from like a pretty reputable source that Carney had refused to speak with Trump initially over the phone because he was referring to him as governor because of the 51st state stuff. And the position of the PMO will speak with President Trump. Mr. Carney will speak with President Trump as soon as, if he agrees to refer to him as the Prime Minister and agrees to refer to the sovereign nation of Canada. And apparently from there, I guess the phone call, the first phone call, we're talking months ago now, was no problem. Actually, that the call went perfectly fine. And I would imagine that Carney probably quietly earned a bit of Trump's respect there. So what does this signal to you, the return of that language around Governor Carney?
I mean, look, I always thought it was really fucking dumb for commentators and for liberals to suggest that Trump had any sort of deep reverence or respect for Carney and that he would never resort to calling someone like him governor, because that sort of insult was specifically reserved for his predecessor, Prime Minister Trudeau, right? Like, this whole thing was only a matter of time before Trump was going to pull the old governor insult out of his back pocket. I mean, he didn't really stop using the whole 51st state rhetoric, right, throughout this time. He may have minimized it. I think you would refer to it as ebbs and flows, right? So there were certain times where that language was minimized, but the sort of overall sentiment about annexing Canada has definitely stayed alive throughout this. And I think in some ways, if we want to be optimistic, I've been cynical this entire time. So if we want to be glass half full here, I think in some ways this should signal that, Carney's doing a good job. If he's pissing off Trump to this degree, right, and he's going back to the old the classics, the hits, right, then maybe we can take some sort of solace in that, that at least now things are sort of normal, and now hopefully with a little bit of good, gentle diplomacy, we can get talk sort of back on track, I guess, or at least move Trump away from the notion that anything that we entered into with China is like the furthest thing away from a full comprehensive free trade deal, and reminding Trump that if we were going to do something like that, then they would obviously have had a heads up because of the way Kuzma is written.
Okay, so let's bring this back to, we've titled this episode U.S. Official Stokes Alberta Separatism, and what this means. You were pretty emphatic in pointing out that this is foreign interference. I'm not suggesting that you expect that there would be any sort of consequence, and definitely no apology for it from the U.S. Treasury Secretary. But why do you think that that's important to note? What do you think? How do you think that Canadians should process that? Not just people in Alberta, and not just people in Alberta who believe that Alberta's future needs to be and will be in Canada, but people across the country.
Well, I mean, look, the U.S. doesn't have Alberta or Albertans' best interest in mind. And the notion that if Alberta were to separate from Canada, and then let's say they were going to join the U.S. somehow, either as like the, whatever, the 51st state, or as some sort of, I don't know, Vichy style, like vassal state, whatever, fine. But I don't do you think, do this folks that are pro-separatism and pro-joining the U.S. or pro-Trump, do they actually think they would get full rights in that situation? No. Do they think you're I don't I question what the end game is here for folks that are in favor of this. Is it just so that you can then become completely absorbed by the U.S. without any real rights that would be recognized? I don't know, but it doesn't seem like it would be a good deal for Alberta or Albertans. And again, I think the reason why it's important to call it foreign interference, because it's just because it's somebody that looks and sounds like us that is saying things that is meant to sow division and discord and to drum up separatist sentiment in this country, it doesn't mean it's not foreign interference. You don't have to be looking like a foreigner in order for it to be foreign interference. If the U.S. does it or China does it, it's the exact same qualification.
Is that something that you think warrants like an official response from the federal government, from the prime minister? I mean, is this something you ignore?
I mean, it would be good if your premier did something. Like, I actually, like, yeah, I mean, I don't think this necessarily needs to be a federal government response, but it would be really good to see some Alberta politicians sort of stand up and have a little bit of backbone here.
Did you see what Jason Kenney posted to Lindsey Graham? This was remarkable over the weekend. So this is, I mean, now I got to clarify here, just to keep our conversation focused. We're not going to be talking for a minute here about the U.S. citizens that have been shot and killed by federal law enforcement, and we're not talking about the U.S. Treasury Secretary musing about Alberta separatism. Now we're going to be talking about the President of the United States implying that NATO member nations have not been there when the U.S. needed them, and when they were, soldiers from Britain and Canada and Poland and Denmark and a number of other countries weren't exactly on the front lines, which obviously enraged political leaders and veterans and probably just generally speaking citizens around the world. Lindsey Graham went to stump for the president over the weekend, said, of course, as Trump walked it back and said the great and very brave soldiers of the UK will always be with the United States of America. He goes on and sort of tries to walk it back, specifically just talking about soldiers from the UK, though. So then says Lindsey Graham, you know, your statement about our British allies speaks for itself. He goes on to say, when it comes to Trump's respect and admiration for those who wear the uniform at home and abroad to protect freedom, he is equal to any, said Senator Graham. In political jousting, he always pushes back. And sometimes, like all of us, he can go too far. Well, Alberta's former premier and, of course, former federal cabinet minister under Stephen Harper, Jason Kenney, tweets, "Not good enough." Senator Graham says Trump insulted the honor of NATO allies, not just the UK. Canadians didn't hang a little back from the front lines. They took one of the toughest missions in Kandahar. Virtually every NATO country suffered combat deaths, and many were in the thick of the action. Kenney says Denmark suffered the second highest level of combat deaths per capita. We all know that you cling to Trump's endorsement like a drowning man to a raft. But please stop pretending that your craven attachment to him is based on principle or honor. It's unseemly. Your late friend John McCain must be rolling over in his grave. And then Kenney shares the numbers of foreign soldiers killed in Afghanistan, and they're staggering. So there's one, for now, former Alberta politician that's clapping back.
Yeah, former. You just said it. It doesn't matter. Like, I think it's good he's doing this. Don't get me wrong. And I think it's good for principled conservatives, especially, like, he's not old. I don't mean I mean like elder statesmen, right? Sure. Like Jason Kenney is like a known figure within the conservative movement. So it's good for him and others to be speaking out against this and for, you know, to be standing up for Canada and for Canadians. But at the end of the day, he doesn't hold elected office anymore, right? Well, who we need to be hearing from are the folks that are elected to represent us and to represent our voice and to push back when this sort of nonsense is out there. And like, let's not forget, the only reason why Trump sort of walked this back to begin with respect to the UK is, well, first and foremost, I think Prime Minister Starmer in the UK, his words were a lot more forceful in pushing back on Trump's classification of NATO losses, or, you know, what NATO forces were doing in Afghanistan generally, in a way that we haven't really seen from, you know, Canadian currently elected leaders. And that has sort of led to the UK really pushing for the Prince Charles visit, or for the King Charles visit, not to happen to the U.S. He's scheduled to go to the U.S. in a few months. And that, my guess would have to be that that's the reason why Trump sort of put out that, you know, statement. And then that's why people in the U.S. are sort of boosting that statement.
You've worked at a PMO at a senior advisor level. What would the team around His Majesty ultimately be basing a decision on? I mean, like, let's just cover some of the basics here. Like, what would be the significance of him not showing up or canceling a trip? What would be the deciding factor for those around him that are making the decision, or maybe he's making the decision ultimately himself? And what sort of an impact do you think it would have on the relationship between those two allies, the UK and the US, and generally speaking, you know, all of the nations that are paying attention? How significant would it be?
I mean, it would be pretty significant. I think it would be a pretty significant snub for the king to cancel a trip. But, you know, they're not political representation, so that they operate independently from the political branch. So I mean, in the UK, like Starmer's folks can give the advice to the king and his people that they should perhaps not be making that trip, but ultimately that's for the king and his people to decide, and they're free to make that choice. I think it would be a mistake if you're getting political advice to suggest that you shouldn't be going and then go anyway. But I, don't know for a fact that those conversations are happening beyond the sort of whispers that you see being sort of reported on or talked about in UK social media and, opinion columns here and there.
We've got a ton of comments here in our chat, powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider, on thoughts on Alberta separation. Ambustion was in there saying, just musing about a referendum on this, says it's already costing our family money. People in specific industries are saying it's already having an impact. Others are saying, and these are interesting comments too, Ms. KD says, when are the separatists going to call the petition what it is? Because joining the U.S. is not independence. Good point there. We got an email here from Matthew to talk@ryanjesperson.com. I want to rip through it with you. He says, I've been thinking about Alberta separation. I've got a list of questions for separatists. He says, I'm sure that there's an infinite number of other questions that need to be answered, but just quick hits here, Supriya. He says, regarding national parks, like what would be the plan for Jasper and Banff? If we move to an American healthcare system, what insurance company would take on my dad, a 75-year-old diabetic? How will doctors and physicians work? What would they have to do to get licensed in a separate Alberta? If we're having issues convincing BC to build a pipeline now, how would that be easier if we separate? What's the plan for a new military? What would happen to existing bases? Are we expecting the rest of Canada to sell us arms when we leave? Says a huge part of our economy right now is construction, based on Canadians from the rest of Canada moving to Alberta. If we make it harder to move here, you're now moving to a different country. What effect might that have on our growth? What's the plan for creating new government regulations? How would things like passports or building codes, immigration services, customs, air traffic control, foreign affairs be funded? What would borders look like between Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC, and Northwest Territories? Says there's a lot of highways, smaller roadways that jump across the border. Would we have customs crossings at all of these? He says, I know that Canada has a tough time keeping telecoms prices down with a limited population. What would prices look like if we're an even smaller population? And if we did become the 51st state, and then Matthew supercharges his email a little bit, says, what are your thoughts, Ryan, on having a president who is almost for sure a pedophile? He says, I'm hoping that a lot of people are thinking this stuff through. So I know that the last one might polarize some that were already on the fence with regards to Matthew's points, but he makes some very valid points on the cost of independence. And I don't know that these are questions that anybody has answers to or that they're even really considering, aside from the anger machine that they don't like Ottawa and they just want to leave.
Yeah, I think that's probably about right. I don't know if these questions have really been thought out by folks that are pushing separation. I would just say that from the Quebec experience, right, what I find interesting is that, and this was recently said, I think within the last week, it was suggested that if Quebec were to separate, well, they just keep the Canadian passports, it's fine. They'd keep the Canadian currency, it's fine. They would just, somehow figure it out. And so even in the context of Quebec separation, which is, of course, much older than the notion of Alberta separation, but has actually gone to a referendum more than once. And if the Parti Québécois wins the next provincial election in Quebec, then they're set to do another referendum. They didn't think about it either. So and on the one hand, I'm willing to cut Alberta separatists a little bit of slack just because Quebec separatists haven't put that much thought into it. But these are very salient questions, right? And without real answers and real solutions to them, it just sort of seems like a bunch of kids playing Model UN.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide whether or not I want to read from
do it.
Alberta's loudest separatist. Well, I mean, it's just
okay.
So Jeff Rath, I mean, like, there's no real, yeah, twist my rubber arm. There's really no like lead. The interesting thing and like the difference between the Parti Québécois and what's happening in Alberta. There's many differences, but one of them is that there's no party, like there's no leader, there's no framework, there's right, like it's just kind of there's the petition, and then but I think a lot of people would be right to ask, well, like, who would lead all this? And I know a lot of people are saying, well, Danielle Smith would be the premier of a province. Province decides to separate. Danielle Smith is the leader that takes us through the separation. Maybe that's the grand plan. But as of right now, unofficially, the face of this, just because he's been making the most noise and doing interviews on Fox and claims to be meeting with members of the U.S. State Department, although that's, I think, a dubious claim. He hasn't released names or talked about any specifics. But Jeff Rath says, for example, over the weekend, he says an independent Alberta could say to BC, for example, 70% of your goods flow through us. We'll inspect every train and truck for rats. It could take months. We'll tariff everything while it sits there, or give us a pipeline. He says that is leverage. Sounds like he's got a plan. He's going to stop trade across the rest of the country, anything coming through Alberta. Can you see it working?
No, of course I can't see that working. And honestly, this is the best gift to Alberta separation in the context of those who want Alberta to remain in Canada, is to have a clown like this be the main spokesperson. Like, you can say whatever you want about Quebec separation, right? But you look back at dudes like René Lévesque, there were serious people, there were serious politicians who, were able to win over hearts and minds of actual Quebecers, and to put forth this idea beyond it just being a sort of sentimental thing, it being an actual argument to be made to preserve Quebec identity and culture, and to ensure an independent way forward for Quebecers. And at least in Quebec, they're all sort of serious folks. You look at the current leader of the Parti Québécois, I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but he doesn't sound like a clown when he talks. He's not going out there making false claims or dubious claims, I guess, as you said, about meeting with State Department officials or what have you. So I think it's a blessing in disguise that this is the face of the Alberta separation movement.
I will also point out here that they've now, for all intents and purposes, declared war with Canada's Conservatives as well. As you can see, Mr. Rath, Pierre Poilievre is no Albertan, and I'm glad he's leaving. So they don't need the federal Conservatives. They're poking the provincial Conservatives in the eye as well. Interesting strategy move. I mean, Poilievre's obviously not going to endorse Alberta Separatists anyway, and Danielle Smith finds herself in a real conundrum here as well. But conservative premiers in Alberta. Is it a conundrum? Well, I mean, for political survival, I mean, it's not a conundrum if you ask me, where should my personal wiring, where should folks' hearts be? Where should their loyalties lie? What should their public statements look like? What gardens should they be watering? There's no real conundrum there. But if you look at political survival, which is the math, that's the calculation that these premiers have had to do. Jason Kenney, was able to unite these parties, 2019, defeat Rachel Notley, the whole 9 yards. And then COVID rolls in, and who did he lose? Because he had to, he was trying to sort of walk this line of not shutting down church services and allowing people still to gather. I know I don't need to explain this to everybody. Everybody understands, but it ended up biting him in the ass, and Danielle Smith finds herself in a similar position, to win that conservative leadership and to knock off Travis Taves, who was kind of respectfully, kind of just the boring, steady choice. A lot of people are he's Alberta's finance minister. He's got a brush cut. He looks like he could keep the province on the rails, and was probably the favorite, not the overwhelming favorite. Taves' biggest issue was probably that, he was sort of just a loyal servant to Jason Kenney. A lot of people didn't know a lot about Travis Taves, but he would have been the favorite, I think, heading into it. But Danielle Smith came up from behind and ended up beating him in a bit of a nail biter, and did so with the support of social conservatives. And now a lot of those social conservatives, I'm not saying all social conservatives are separatists, but I think all separatists are social conservatives. Now she finds herself in a tough spot where if she loses them, then there's a very good chance that she could be in real trouble. You know what I'm saying? Just with regards to the future of being premier.
I totally get that. And I get the math, to what you're saying is that there are a certain amount of folks that, that's within her base, it becomes problematic for her. But the only thing I was saying is that questioning whether or not it's a conundrum, because it shouldn't be a conundrum whether or not you love this country and whether or not you want it to stay together, right? That to me is the number one sort of thing. Anybody who's is a leader in elected office, that's what they should be coming down on. And the other aspect of this is that if she is an actual leader, then leaders do lead. So if she actually came down forcefully on the side of Canada, I mean, couldn't she then presumably lead some folks that are soft or on the fence back into the Canada fold? Even if, I'm not saying you're going to come back into the Canada fold and all of a sudden you're Ottawa's number one fan, but come back into the fold so at least you're not flirting with becoming a U.S. vassal state.
Yeah. And one of the things that's just blowing my mind right now is with all of the I was going to say the drama. I mean, that sounds almost dismissive and disrespectful, but just with everything happening down in the United States right now, you would think that it would kind of be snapping a lot of people out of the mindset that they're in regarding the future of Alberta. And I know that a lot of people will say, well, yeah, I'm fighting for an independent Alberta. Or I'm campaigning for a sovereign Alberta. I'm not campaigning for Alberta to join the United States. But if you want to look like logistically at how that could even work, basically the only way that it could work for Alberta would be to join the United States or have some sort of agreement there. It's really basically the only way. And if you're looking at how the United States is going right now, you would think that would dissuade people from doing everything they could to break away from Canada, which for all intents and purposes, Canada's not perfect. But I definitely look, I mean, if you're making a choice between the two nations right now, I can't wrap my mind around how your choice would be the United States.
Totally. Yeah, no disagreement here. Yeah.
What I'm saying might be pretty obvious, but yet here we are. Before we run out of time, always appreciate you joining us first episode of every week, Supriya. I want to pick your brain on what's happening. A report in the Globe and Mail. I know people have been talking about this as Canada social media, kids under 14. This has kind of been a common theme over the past couple of months with your appearances on this show. We've taken a look at what Australia has been doing. What do you make of this story, this report?
Yeah, look, I think anytime, and I think Minister Miller, who's the Heritage Minister, has come out to say that if they were going to move forward with anything within this realm, then it wouldn't solely be a ban for social media for kids under 14. It would be packaged together with, other regulations. And I think that's the right way, because I think we can't ban kids from social media, right? And then the second they turn 14, we throw them into an environment that has no guardrails, that has no sort of safety for them whatsoever. So anything would have to be paired with that. And then my only other thing that I would say on this is that I don't know, for me, if you're banning something, it's almost like you've thrown in the towel, that it's like you can't properly regulate it. And I think that's the wrong sort of approach. I'm not saying that kids under 14 should be on social media. I'm not endorsing that. I should also point out that in Canada currently, and for most of these platforms, their terms of service don't actually allow kids under the age of 13. But right now you just have to do a simple attestation to say that, yes, I'm over the age, and then you can use, the platform of choice. But I think just generally what we need to be doing is demanding some sort of accountability and responsibility from these large platforms that prey on our children. And basically what that comes down to is ensuring that they have a duty to act responsibly, so that, they have a duty towards their users, that they're going to minimize the risk of their products before unleashing them onto their users. And they're not doing that right now. And that's what they should be doing. They're also not really enforcing their own terms of service, which I would just point out, if these platforms took their terms of service seriously and enforced them, then, government wouldn't necessarily even have to regulate at all. But here we are. So
do you think that, would Canada be able to enforce? I mean, you can implement these laws, but it's like, no access for kids under 14, no targeted marketing for, I think they were saying it was under 16 or 18. There's kind of like different layers to this, but law is only as strong as a regulator's ability to enforce it, right?
Yeah, and what regulator right now would we be using? I don't know. We'd have to create a whole new regulator. At least in the UK, you have Ofcom that can sort of do this, and that's the regulator that they've had. Australia, they also have their own regulator. We don't right now. So it's unless we're creating something anew, where does this go? Go to the CRTC? I don't think it should go there. So it'll be really interesting to see what Ottawa does, I guess. But I don't know. It's to your point about, can something like this be enforced? Can we even go about it? Yeah, there's always going to be sort of holes and whatnot, but we can go about it if we wanted to. It's just the other big giant question here, of course, is how is the U.S. going to react? And I'm not saying we should back away from stuff, because the U.S. is going to hold it over our head like a cudgel just to beat us over the head with it. But we have to be mindful of the fact that even something as, benign as like a digital services tax was going to put the U.S. administration's panties in a bunch and had us back off of it. I can only imagine what, regulating some of the oligarchs, and that's the only way to refer to them, some of the oligarchs in Trump's circle, regulating their businesses, it's going to get back to Trump, and I'm for sure that's going to be used against us.
How would you, this is your wheelhouse. I mean, this is your area of expertise. When you reference Australia or the UK and how positioned they are, with regards to regulators and everything else, in metaphor or just in plain language, like how far behind is Canada on this file?
Oh, over a decade.
Really?
10 to 15 years. Yeah, at least.
Is that just were we just asleep at the switch a decade ago?
We attempted a bunch of times, right? So we've had these attempts. The first attempt by the Liberal government would have been under Stephen Guilbeault when he was Heritage Minister, and that was just a disaster because what was being proposed at the time was basically just content moderation on steroids. So saying that they were going to come after the content itself, and going after content is effectively like whack-a-mole at the largest scale. You're never going to be able to whack down all those moles as they're sort of popping up. The problem is the incentive structure. It's the actual design of these systems that allow for harmful content to not only be created, but then disseminated at scale to the degree at which it does. And so you have to go to the design of the systems and say to these platforms, you have to design these systems responsibly. You can't just unleash harms onto the mass public, particularly children, if you're not going to at least try and mitigate some of these harms and take active steps to keep your users safe, particularly your child users. And so I don't know, like the last time we would have had an online harms bill was when I was still in government. It was under Trudeau. That bill ended up dying on the order paper. And, full disclosure, I think there are a ton of mistakes that we made at the time. I think the right way to do it is to keep out any sort of criminal code heavy stuff in its own separate bill, and to keep the focus of any sort of online harms bill to be focused on the accountability mechanism and the responsibility of these platforms, and to keep it as narrow as possible and I'm saying narrow as possible because obviously other things are going to get pulled into it, but to keep it as lean and narrow as possible on the regulatory aspect of ensuring that these platforms are behaving responsibly towards their users.
I want to ask you a personal question. Approach it to whatever degree you're comfortable. You're the mother of a young girl. I'm the father of two young boys. My wife, Carrie Skelton, on Instagram, people can check this out. I'm showing it right now, has posted a few days ago just a query around where families are at. I recognize you and I are talking about social media platforms, but talking about YouTube as well. And there's YouTube Kids. And Carrie and I haven't necessarily, like in a healthy way, I don't know if I say disagree. We come at this from different angles on, she sort of wants to take a hard line on YouTube, like no YouTube Kids in the house. Our kids are not on YouTube Kids. I'm sort of, I want our kids to have healthy online habits and to understand what they're dealing with. Dad makes his living on YouTube, which is kind of interesting. And so she's put it out to her followers on Instagram where they land on it. And we've had some really interesting replies. But before we get to some of those, like, do you have kind of like a household rule on YouTube Kids?
Yeah, I do. I don't let her watch it. I mean, like she can go on it if I'm physically present, if there's another adult that's physically present, as she's trying to look for something specific. But I hate the idea of an algorithm deciding what she's going to watch next. And the problem is that even unfortunately on some of these, whether it's like a YouTube Kids or something where you've put some sort of controls on it, or they're claiming it to be kid-only content, stuff creeps in, man. And it's worrying. And I think it's very Orwellian to sort of give away agency and responsibility, and you're just sort of sitting in front of an idiot box, and the idiot box is deciding for you what channel is going to be changed or what show is going to be watched next, instead of you being the one with agency. Like if this is an old-timey TV with a remote, you would obviously change the channel or put something on, but that's not how it is anymore. You're having big tech decide for you what's next, and I don't know. It's very easy to be pulled into rabbit holes. And again, we started this off talking about this section very personally. I will say very personally, I saw firsthand with my husband's algorithms, who, when he was first diagnosed with cancer, initially it was like, here's a recipe for green juice that's going to help you with your nausea as you undergo chemotherapy. To very quickly, Ryan, his algorithms being like, here's a crystal that's going to cure your incurable stage 4 cancer.
Right.
And here's this experimental treatment that doctors don't want you to know about. And it's like, he was a smart guy. He was an engineer, very scientifically minded. But I don't know how many times in the 7 months from his diagnosis to death that he would send me things being like, we should try this out, or what about this, or what about this? And I'd be like, nah, babe, that's not it. And it tears away at you. And so I can certainly understand somebody being dragged down a number of ways, whether it's health disinformation, whether it's, conspiracy theories about government or what have you.
Yeah.
And the algorithms know, and they prey on people that are vulnerable.
Yeah. Vulnerable is the word. I was going to say desperate. Like, I guess just what I mean by that is just people that are in a position, that I lost a friend to a brain tumor a couple of years ago, and same thing with him, and like super smart guy. Same as your man. And this guy was just sharp as hell. But when he got really tough news about the reality of what he was living with and ultimately what would lead to him not living, he was willing to try anything. And I wanted to pick your brain on that. I appreciate you taking the question. It's always so good to see you, and we look forward to chatting with you. Hey, I have a surprise. I'll just tell you, it's not that big of a surprise, but I'll let you know ahead of time. We've, Philippe Fournier from 338 Canada, he's coming out from Quebec to Calgary this coming weekend for Conservative Convention. So he asked if he could hop on with you and me next Monday.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
I thought it'd be great. He could give us the on-the-ground report from Calgary, and then he can also talk to us. I mean, you and him obviously know Quebec very well, so I think we'll have a great conversation. That'll be next Monday.
Looking forward to it.
All right, my friend. We'll see you then. That's
Bye,
Supriya Dwivedi, who joins us first episode of every week in our feature interview, courtesy of our friends at Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. I want to get to some of the comments here on YouTube, kids, and I'm just ripping them off from Gary's Instagram replies. We'll see what you have to say in our live chat as well, powered by Park Power. Hey, if you haven't yet had this on your radar, I want to make sure that it is. If you're anywhere near Edmonton's metro region, if you're any bit involved or interested in theater, you must check out Death of a Salesman. It's now officially underway. The run at the Citadel Theatre all the way through till February 15th. Of course, don't have to tell you that this is an absolute classic. Death of a Salesman, for theater lovers, a must attend. And for those of you that may be relatively new to theater, this is a great place to start. A gripping exploration of the American dream. This timeless classic follows Willie Loman, a traveling salesman nearing the end of his career as he's struggling to reconcile his aspirations with reality. His journey reveals deep truths about ambition, identity, and legacy. Death of a Salesman runs through till February 15th at the Citadel Theatre. You can get your tickets today by visiting citadeltheatre.com. If you're into live performance, but comedy's more your jam, I want to let you know UCAN Comedy Nights are back coming up in March. These sell out every single year. You can check out ucan.ca to book your seats. Book a table. That's what we're doing. Bring some friends, good laughs, a great cause, and an even greater impact in support of UCAN Youth Services. Comedy Nights run March 9th through the 11th, and then the 16th through the 18th. We're going to be there, and there will be a couple of Real Talk live auction items up for grabs. We encourage you to support those if you can. You can get your tickets to UCAN Comedy Nights by checking out ucan.ca. Coming up this Thursday, another edition of Alberta Wins, presented by Play Alberta. These are the stories many times submitted by you, Real Talkers, about Albertans that are making this province proud on the national or international stage. It's proudly presented by Play Alberta, where there are major casinos casino winners every hour, with all the revenue staying right here in Alberta. You can download the Play Alberta app today or check out the website, playalberta.ca, to get started with casino, sports, and lottery all in one app. You got to be 18 or over to play. And when you do gamble, please use your game sense. Athabasca University welcoming students 12 months a year. There's no real back to school in September. While that may be the case for most folks based on our monthly cadence, the beauty of Athabasca University is you can get started whenever it works best for you. You can fast forward through your programs. You can press pause. If real life is standing in the way, that's just one or two of the AU advantages. World-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. The Real Talkers, I'll let you know if you're intrigued by this conversation around digital literacy and kids and tech and social media. We're going to be talking about kids and screen time with an Athabasca University expert. That's coming up first week of February. Very much looking forward to that. You can check out Athabasca University online by visiting athabascau.ca. This show's technical director, Johnny Infamous Hicks, flying the plane today.
Good day, sir.
Good to see you, sir. I hope you had a great weekend. Your thought, it's interesting to hear Supriya sharing about her husband's experiences with the YouTube algorithm and sort of taking him down from, you're searching on like what's a good greens juice to help with nausea, and then the next thing you know, it's got you way over here. I know for a lot of parents, they'll have had their own equivalent of that. The kid starts watching, Bluey or Blippy or something like that on YouTube, and then the next thing you know, they're watching just a bizarre video that they've essentially been fed by the algorithm. We're trying to come up with kind of a family policy ourselves. And we're hearing from some interesting.
Good luck.
And as
I
you
say this all the time.
I don't know what the right answer is.
No, the internet is an adult space. The TV is an adult space. I mean, and when I say adult, I mean 13 and older. Like if you flick through the TV back in the day before we had the internet, I mean, 9 out of 10 things is sex, violence, profanity, questionable stuff, adult stuff. And then you have something geared specifically towards kids, right? A certain channel will be playing usually in the mornings, early afternoon.
Yeah.
And now we have the internet where, for me, it's great because I love drama and intrigue and sex and violence, and it's readily available on social media platforms. For God's sakes, you open up Instagram and go through Reels, and I'm like, this is wild. No wonder there should be. I don't even like what's the age? I think it's 13 right now. You can't be on social. 13 to sign up for Instagram? Is it 14?
Well, they were looking. I don't know what Instagram's
Anyways,
rules
I
are.
think it should be 18 because I opened and I know the algorithm's geared towards me and my, crazy messed up mind, what I like, but it is just it is not a space for kids.
Got to be 13 for Instagram.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 13 for most of the platforms, but it's just not a space for kids unless you're watching them, and even then you're gonna have to grab and swipe and not show them things. And I also agree, I don't have kids, but I've kind of checked in and seen how YouTube Kids work, obviously because I wanted to know just for my benefit, and I agree. I don't know if there's anything in city. There's nothing evil about it, but as that algorithm keeps going, and as the few ads roll, and you're selling stuff to kids. You're drawing them into certain rabbit holes and certain streamlines of content. Like, hey, if you like this, you might like this, and then edging that fader on a mixer, if you will, just a little up every time, just a little up, pushing the boundary a little more and a little more. So I would say, don't take advice from me. I don't have kids, but I would there's no good answer. If you want your kid to be 100% safe, they shouldn't be looking at a screen.
You know what I really appreciate about what you just said? I mean, most of it. But also like at the end where you acknowledge you're like, I don't have kids. I see so many people, and I don't think, by the way, that you have to have kids to understand policy and have smart ideas for sure. But all we see around us is we saw this during the teacher strike as well. The loudest person in my entire circle, the loudest person I know with the strongest opinions on teachers has no kids, has had no interaction, hasn't been in a school in 30 years. I guarantee it.
Sometimes it's a clear head because parents, God bless you guys. I know you love your kids, right? And that emotion, that attachment, that protection kind of feeling inside of you, again, which I don't understand fully because I don't have kids, I imagine would draw you to, not make the right decision every time because you want to 100% stand up for kids, protect them and whatever. But just for me, like every day, I was thinking about this the other day. I was opening the internet and I saw Carrie's post and I was like, I don't even think about it. I don't even think about a kid opening Instagram because it seems so adult themed to me that I'm like, kids aren't on this, but they are. Kids grab phones and iPads and computers and they look at all this stuff.
And I think that there's always we can look back to our own childhood and remember, maybe a kid will immediately come to mind for you. I know who mine is. There's always the one kid in the family that's basically allowed to watch anything and do anything.
Yeah.
Every friend circle has the one kid.
You're going to see it eventually.
Parents, you know what I mean? You're going to see it eventually.
Have a sip of this beer.
Dad's out having a smoke and the kids are doing whatever they want. Tracy D says, guys, it's not just vulnerable and desperate people. Sometimes just everyday folks who have a credit card and buy the crap that the algorithm thinks they need. Tracy says, I am raising my hat to that. Here are just some of the comments on Carrie's post, and you can follow her on Instagram at Carrie Skelton. Urban Timber, our friends at Urban Timber did a lot for us in building this studio. Great to see him. Darren in there commenting says, our daughter's not much into shows, but she just has a wild imagination that keeps her really occupied. He says, so we started watching really cool science shows on YouTube, and I thought they were educational, but her reaction when I told her we needed to turn them off was shocking. He says, I've never seen that side of her. She was very upset to the point that it was a bit concerning. He says, Netflix, Disney, never an issue, but YouTube was definitely doing something that we were very uncomfortable with. It sounds almost sort of like, she needed to be weaned off it or there was like an addiction. Kendall Barber, shout out to Kendall and her team at Poppy Barley, says, kids are allowed to watch YouTube with a parent, but definitely not on their own. Josh Richardson says, good on you guys for being vulnerable enough to admit that you disagree on an important topic. He says also telling that the subject of this post isn't the disagreement, but what you think is best for your kids. He says you both care more about finding the best solution as opposed to being right. And he says, and also I have no clue what the right approach is. So I appreciate that. Allison says, as a teacher of tweens, I find the argument of, they need to learn how to use tech. Says, I find that argument is incorrect, to be blunt. No, they don't. She says they can learn when they're much older. Brains are too young to learn those things now. Same way they don't drive till they're 16. They don't drink till they're 18. She says, when we drank underage, we weren't, quote, learning how to use alcohol responsibly. We were taking huge risks with our lives, and we're lucky we survived it. Kids don't need to be on any social media ever. That from Allison. And quite frankly, it's hard to disagree with what she's saying there. How about this account? Equipped Parenting. Great handle. Says, what a great convo. I'm a huge fan of complete bans as kids do access YouTube, and they will at school as they age. She says, I work with my kids on the following: what's safe to watch and what's not, vetting appropriate content, watching in the same room as us, and limiting time to prevent endless scrolling. Caribou says we never allowed it until our kids were in junior high, and even then 1 hour of tech a day until then. Even then, any gaming was limited to 1 hour a day, so we had firm boundaries. Haven't even talked about gaming. Gaming I think is, I don't know if it's a separate conversation. It's an adjacent conversation.
I am not a parent, but just all the screens, Ryan, no matter what they're showing.
Yeah.
Gaming these days is so wildly intense and realistic, right? And I don't have to tell people who have a PlayStation or whatever in their house and see what their teenagers are playing, that I don't even know if it's for teens. And I know it's rated properly and there's rules and, that are followed. But for me, every time I see, I go to someone's house and they have a kid or some of my friends play games, I'm like, this is shell shock for me. But maybe that's because I haven't, I remember playing Super Mario Bros. And then PlayStation, I was on cool borders, like snowboarding. Now it's intense, army tactic missions that are very realistic. And, I don't want to say that they're the reason for things happening, but I mean, even the U.S. Army is actively going after gamers to be like drone pilots and things like that these days. So they're definitely they're very realistic, and I think they can be detrimental. At the same time, I'll bring this back because I know somebody's going to be thinking, well, Johnny, when the whole book ban was going on, you said it was fine that all those sexually, depicted books were able to be in schools, but you don't want people looking at screens. Yes, you're exactly right. I would rather kids learn about sex from award-winning novels and teachers, being in the area or, assessing the information, delivering it to the children. I would love for them to learn about sex, violence, all those other things through those means rather than looking at a screen. But I do realize that, I feel for parents because your kid is gonna. I'm not saying your kids specifically. I'm just saying kids in general. They are gonna sneak around. They're gonna grab an iPad. They're gonna find someone's phone. They've got a friend who has a phone too young, and they're going on sites. They're looking at things they shouldn't look at. That's just being a kid. The same way as we, stole cigarettes and porno mags from our. You know what I mean? I feel for you. I don't think you can 100% shield them from the world.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
To state the obvious, these books that you're talking about that would describe the sexual experience or the coming of age novel, whatever, there's not that algorithmic effect where all of a sudden they're putting porno mags in your hand.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? Like the algorithm keeps serving things up.
Or here's another book that's a level up from this one.
Right.
Try this one if you like that one.
Ambustion says, thanks for your YouTube channel membership, says, I support banning social media sites if they have no moderation. Put moderation on their backs. He says, we've done it with broadcasters. It's not that hard. We have to stop feeling bad for tech companies who cry because their business model won't work if they have to work for society. Scarlett says, in the very least, any legislation should be focused on protecting youth from sexual predators. She says, by the way, my nephew learned the N-word with unmonitored access to YouTube. A lot of you are sort of sharing what your families have done here. Aaron says, I'd rather know what my kids are doing rather than have them hide their use. That's what you just said. Ken K says, we brought our kids up in the country. TV was, rabbit ears for most of their childhood and spotty, slow internet, and it turned out really well. Chantel says, my kids are 6 and 9. They know that they're not allowed to watch YouTube. And why? I check their iPads regularly, and they don't go behind my back to watch it. Says, I don't know, maybe your kids do. Lazy Fish Keeper says, in a country that's banned commercials during the times when children were watching TV to protect kids, we can definitely write laws to prosecute deliberate misinformation. 80s Fanify says, my preteen watches gamers on YouTube and was just presented with a pro-Alberta Separatist video. Thankfully, he showed it to me. Ms. KD is remembering her grandma calling the TV the idiot box. Tony says, when you're desperate for information, some people will just cling onto anything, even if it's wrong. It's heartbreaking. And she said, by the way, went on to say how much she enjoys having Supriya on first episode of every week. Same as us, 100%. Alberta Girl says parenting's hard, guys, but we have to stop using tech as a babysitter and engage with our kids, and it's really good for all of us. I like that idea. Nick D says, we've heard that YouTube will be allowing parental controls to block shorts. He says that that's a big step. Just make sure you don't block our shorts, buddy. Yeah, this is cool. Let us know what you think or what your family has done. Like, Aaron talking about says, my kids didn't own their own phones forever. In grade 9, the teacher asked them to look something up on their phones. My kid was the only one without one, says he had one the next day. Interesting. I mean, as far as I know, phones are supposed to be banned in classrooms now anyway, so I don't know if teachers are they actually enforcing that? I don't know. I mean, there's that Fort Saskatchewan high school social studies teacher that was, I don't know if you say caught on camera, but captured on camera anyway with his conservative lesson. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. I'd be curious to know how many high schools are actually enforcing that with no phones in the classrooms. We'll rely on you. I know that there's a lot of teachers that listen to the show. High school students listen to the show. Let us know. I'd be curious to know where you land on this. Scarlett says, my algorithm's terrible. Says I get pushed supplements all day long, beef liver pills as a cure for all women's issues. I sometimes look at my algorithm, I'm like, how did I wind up here?
Yeah, but look, and I'm not talking directly to anyone, but your algorithm, it's your fault. It's a reflection of you, no matter how much you hate it and look at it and want to blame someone else, because I recently I'm happy with my algorithm now. It's the first time in forever. I don't know.
Curated it.
I don't know what's been happening the last 60 to 90 days where it takes to like flip. But now I'm looking at it and it's like, oh, it's like meal planning and puppies and stuff like this. Whereas before you didn't even want to know what was on there. But I mean, it's a reflection of you. It's hard to look at it because it's like a therapist showing you your childhood.
Well, I was
but it is you.
It was. I was sort of in a weird headspace on Saturday. As mentioned, I'm hosting Chamber Ball, which is like a highlight. It's like a top 3 event for me all year. Get all dolled up and go connect with a lot of people. Very inspiring folks. Wonderful production by our friends at the Edmonton Chamber. But up until the point where I was getting into the shower to get ready, I was guilty of scrolling a little bit, and my entire algorithm was just the Alex Preddy's death in Minneapolis and the Alberta separation stuff. And I was just like, I need a break, man. I need to go watch. I don't know. Do I need to go watch like Nature is Metal? I need to go watch animals killing each other. I don't know what I need to watch. You just got to
flush it out. Like I said when we started this conversation, every time I got on Instagram, it was just like all the bad things from my mind. And it's like, I don't even know if you go on looking for it, but then you tap, sometimes you tap things that aren't good for you and you just get stuck with it. But for a while, I just made a conscious effort to kind of change it because it was full of like just sex and violence and drama and
Nick D says you got to carefully curate your algorithm, like Johnny's just saying. He says, I purposely do not click on subjects that are tinfoil hat, even if it did sound amusing or I might laugh at it. He says it would be fed to me continually once you click. Nia says, thanks for your YouTube channel membership. Nia says, as a parent of a 16 and a 19-year-old, so Nia's kind of like entering that phase of releasing them out into the world. Says we did the kids YouTube, but had no social media. That was our policy. We used to download content and have devices disconnected from the internet, and that really helped a lot. I think that's a great idea. A lot of people are chiming in on whether or not, Chantel, for example, says you don't necessarily have to have kids to know from personal experience what is and isn't okay. I totally agree. Noob Try Again says, coming from a father, Johnny, you don't need to have a kid to have thoughtful input. There's a difference between what you do and pretend, or what you do, Johnny, and pretending to be the ultimate authority. Nick D says, real talk, tech, and food are my YouTube, and that's it. Well, I'm glad that we cracked that. I appreciate that. Game Time Y says the tech oligarchy are stoking this too, but it's also 100% the Americans. They have a long history of being in Alberta, and those grassroots parent groups are almost exclusively Republican-backed. This is a question that a lot of people are going to be asking, by the way. I know that some of our subjects have been interwoven today. When it comes to Alberta separation, when it comes to sovereignty, 51st state garbage, a lot of people are starting to wonder about dark money and where the funds are coming from and where the influence is coming from. And there have been precedents set, right? I mean, didn't Elon Musk donate, someone can fact check me, something like 50 G's to the Ottawa occupation, and there was a lot of money that was being funneled toward that freedom convoy. And I think we'd be naive at best, that's the most generous word I can think of, to believe that the Americans and that money from the United States is not going to be entering Alberta to influence the impact of any referendum as it comes. And I'm almost certain that Alberta will see a referendum this year. I'm not going to say I bet my house on it, but I'm feeling like it's close. We invite your feedback to talk@ryanjesperson.com. If you know Real Talk, you know that these conversations are continuing conversations. And, of course, our understanding of the issues important to you are enriched and made more deep by your feedback to the show. So we appreciate everybody that takes the time to send us an email, including Lisa in BC. And we'll wrap with hers. First episode of every week, we wrap with something positive along the lines of what Tony just said. Tony says, I love having Supriya on the show every Monday. It kind of gets me refocused, feeling encouraged after a bummer of a weekend. Well, that's the point of positive reflections as we renew our faith in humanity or focus on a silver lining or something that's filled our bucket. Lisa wrote in from BC, doesn't say where, but where in BC, but she says to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Jespo, Johnny, and Real Talkers wanted to send a quick note just to say thank you. Says, I'm a fairly new podcast subscriber from British Columbia. I discovered Real Talk because a friend recommended it to me, and it's now part of my daily routine. You guys, this is music to our ears. And thanks to whoever Lisa's friend is, but says what keeps me coming back day after day to Real Talk is the nuance in a media environment that oftentimes rewards outrage or simplification. I appreciate the space that this show creates creates for thoughtful conversation, respectful disagreement, and genuine debate on issues that actually matter. She says it feels rare and it's definitely necessary. Lisa says, the odd day I watch the live chat, even though I've never participated, but there's a strong sense of community there. Listening in or watching that, I feel connected to people who are curious, engaged, and willing to listen to perspectives beyond their own. That's a compliment to every one of you. Lisa says, I just wanted you to know that what you're doing reaches further than you may realize. Thank you for building something that feels both smart and welcoming. Smart and welcoming. That from Lisa in BC. Well, Lisa, you filled our bucket for the week to come, and we sure appreciate you. Welcome to the Real Talk fold. And to whoever Lisa's friend is, thanks for telling her about it. We invite you to do so every single week, and we invite you to send us your positive reflection to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Don't forget, you can always get a free solar quote by checking out Kuby.ca. That's KUBY.ca. We're back at it in less than 24 hours. The next episode of Real Talk, of course, we want to make sure that we're getting to what matters most to you, and you can have input on our next shows. Dr. Andrew Boozery is going to join us out of Ontario. They're working on a very interesting model, kind of similar to that bridge healing program we told you about here out of the Royal Alexandra Hospital. It's called Done House. We're going to learn how they're freeing up space in emergency rooms in Ontario and helping the unhoused population find more stability. It's a good news story. Blaise Bomer's going to join us on the show tomorrow as well. You may recognize his name, a senior advisor, comms and strategy for then Alberta Premier Jason Kenney. Blaise claims that from the very beginning, he believed that recall legislation was a bad idea. So why did his boss implement it against Blaise's advice? I mean, the short answer is because Kenney was the boss. But Blaise tells us he's going to lay it all out in an episode you won't want to miss. Thanks in advance for telling your friends about this one. Thank you for liking our episodes. Thanks for subscribing wherever you find your podcasts and, of course, on our YouTube channel. And thanks for supporting our sponsors. We appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Ori Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.